Welcome back to my channel. This has been a long time coming, and I knew that all of you have noticed that I've been mentioning that I've done an interview with Derick Dillard. What I originally wanted to do was bring this to all of you in a way in which Derick could actually speak to you, but that's not actually what ended up happening. Instead, what's going to occur is that I'm going to give you all of the information from our interview. I had dialogues with Derick and other individuals through emails as well as Twitter direct messages. He took the time to provide some of the information that I had been questioning, and we got to cover many topics. Some of the information he provided helps to clarify many ideas that we had all been wondering about for so many years. The reason that I ended up reaching out to Derick to begin with is because of things that he has publicly stated in December 2019 and January 2020. Derick started opening up around that time about counting on his father-in-law and the family overall. To be perfectly honest with you, this is actually nothing new either. Derick has actually been voicing his concerns and speaking up for at least the past 2 years. Looking at the tweets he made after my investigation, something I showcased in a video earlier this week, by the way, I did see a trend. This wasn't an angry man going off half-coasted making flippant statements. This was a man making pointed statements about problems in the show itself. Problems with pay. Problems related to his wife. These weren't general complaints. Most of us remember how this story actually began. It started when, in 2015, In Touch Weekly received, under the Freedom of Information Act, documents from Springdale, Arkansas. Although everything in the papers had been blacked out, there was enough there to make people very, very nervous regarding Josh Duggar's behavior towards some sisters when he was merely a youth. Based on these records, it can be noted that the information had first surfaced from an anonymous tip-off made to this hotline. This was associated with Oprah's group. This incident occurred at a point in time when Oprah had scheduled an interview with the Duggar family, which was set to take place during the mid-2000s. Although an investigation had previously occurred, the incidents did not fade away as it had been anticipated. This led to 4 of the Duggar sisters, if they can be so categorized while trying to be as polite as possible, being recognized as having been affected by their brother's actions. This is what altered all of this. It all changed when this information was made public. This history is important, as it provides the context that ultimately leads to why Derick felt the need to speak out and why his message resonated so strongly. The conversation that I had with you did not emerge from a vacuum. It was the product of frustration and unanswered questions that have been simmering beneath the surface. Even still, the show pressed forward. Josh was taken out of the limelight, but Jim Bob managed to keep everything else from getting out. Yes, the Duggar family did experience an investigation during that time. The children were questioned, social services were brought in, and there were also official interviews that were carried out. All of this later came to light when In Touch Weekly released documents in 2015.
The news of this incident created a ripple effect. The shock in this situation wasn't only about the incident, it was about the people who were associated with it as well. Josh Duggar had been a strong advocate of family values until this incident. Josh was associated with organizations which talked ill of people who took actions against children. Therefore, the moment the truth came out, people were flabbergasted. Unfortunately, one of the people who was hit hardest by this was the newly married wife of Derick Dillard's, Jill. Jill was one of the people who was a part of what Josh did, though her name was removed from the documents. Just think about the fact that you are newly married and then something as hurtful as that comes from the past. As a reaction, the Duggar family chose to go on a media tour. The family appeared online, granted interviews, and most importantly, met with Megyn Kelly at Fox News. While making these appearances, Jim Bob and Michelle have both denied allegations against them. The couple maintained that they had reported everything properly and that they had done what they could. What was so uncomfortable for people was that Jill and Jessa were brought in for that Megyn Kelly interview. Being a witness within that viewing public, it was difficult not to feel a sense of awkwardness and pain in that situation. Jill and Jessa minimized what actually had taken place for them. They both made sure everyone understood that they loved their brother, but that they had also forgiven him. It all seemed less about healing and more about being pushed. However, despite the outcry from the public from the events that had been happening in the reality TV series 19 Kids and Counting, the program was alleged to be canceled. However, according to Derick Dillard, the cancellation of the reality TV series only occurred in name. In the years 2017 and 2018, he claimed that the reality TV series featuring his family had ended, but his contract with Jim Bob Duggar was intact. As part of this transition, the reality show 19 Kids and Counting simply morphed into what would begin under the new banner of Counting On. The same faces, same format, and same machine kept chugging along. Counting On was first centered around Jill and Jessa because the plan was to watch as they began their married lives, their husbands, and then finally their families they would bring into the world over the years to come. However, as the years progressed, other siblings such as Ginger with Jeremy, Joyanna who marry Austin, and then finally the brothers such as Joe and John as they decided to get married began to be included as well. To the outside observer, it seemed to be some kind of family arrangement where all parties involved were benefiting. However, according to Derick, this was simply not the case for him and Jill. He claims that although they had the names that are central to the show, although they had their wedding aired on the show, and although the birth of their first child was documented, they never received payment, not a dime. Derick made sure to make this point clear that his father-in-law, Jim Bob, was in fact the only person who was getting paid by the network. According to Derick, when he asked why everyone's time wasn't being paid, he was told that his father-in-law had already donated or volunteered everyone's time in the name of their mission work.
Now, let's pause right there, because at this point, this show would have been getting huge ratings. Clearly, anyone watching this outside of the situation would know that they had to at least be getting paid. I mean, their entire life is out there, right? However, as per Mr. D, this was not so. Things came to a head with the birth of their first son, Israel. Jill had a C-section, and their newborn had to stay back in the hospital for a prolonged period. As anybody knows who has dealt with their hospital bill, it does not take long for the costs to rack up. Derick made a comment about this in 2018 on Twitter. His tweets are deleted now. In his deleted tweets, he explained that they had reached out to a network for financial assistance in relation to Israel's birth medical bills. It was then that people particularly noted that a lot of money had been made by TLC in relation to that very birth. There was a birth special that involved Jill. Derick claimed the television network refused to assist or pay off any of these expenses. They could definitely help us pay the bills, yes. You had a good job, you weren't looking for charity, but as he said, that wasn't really the point. The point is, they're making money off an intense personal moment in our lives, and the least they could do is help pick up the pieces financially. To Derick, it was more like an abuse of trust in use, and this would only become more apparent to him in the coming weeks. Derick continued by explaining that the producers were always asking for their time. This was needed for filming. This was a very one-sided deal from the producers. They understood that the network was making a lot of money. However, all that Jill and Derick wanted was a little help with some costs. This was all that they wanted. What he meant was that they in fact did pay for the hospital bills out of pocket. However, he also believed there was nothing wrong with their request, considering how much TLC was getting out of them. In an interesting turn of events, he believed the network should have dealt with the situation in a different manner. As he said, doing the right thing should always mean more to us than taking the path of least resistance. This situation has made my point for me. Derick has also reiterated something that he has reiterated in the past, about how all wages at that time were actually payable to Jim Bob. All this has never changed, according to Jim Bob's explanation. However, in recent times, there have been some observable changes online. I tried to contact Derick again after he posted some statements on Instagram that his family did not celebrate the holiday with the Duggars. This provided an opportunity to have a better conversation. During our conversation, Derick gave further insight into his experiences on Counting On, about why Jill chose not to continue with the filming after the information about her being one of her brother's victims was made public. He explained the process of filming the reality television show was emotionally draining on her. Despite this, he explained she was forced to continue filming either through the threat of a lawsuit or through a contract. Again, he reiterates that she did not get paid. Finally, it all became too much to handle. According to Derick, they all reached a point where they decided to distance themselves from the show completely. In a post on his Twitter account, he wrote that the process of shooting for the reality show had almost driven them to the point of insanity, and they still find themselves piecing things back together to this day. I first tried to contact Derick in January. He didn't get back with me at first, but he did this past week. When he did, I questioned him about what had been taking place with a series of direct questions. One of the reasons I wanted to talk to him is quite simple. I wanted to understand, from his perspective, what really happened behind the scenes and what lessons might be hidden within it all. One thing I was very curious about was what exactly Derick thinks that people misunderstand about him, not just the family story, but the public image in general. And it was at this point that he was very forthcoming. He started off speaking about modesty, which was one of the big themes in both of his wife's shows. Only girls wear skirts, girls have to wear long hair, and garments that cover practically everything. That's not up for debate. But Derick doesn't view things this way. He told me very clearly that he does not believe it's wrong for girls to wear pants, to get pierced, to cut their hair short. He says he intends to raise his own kids, boys and girls, to find what they are passionate about in life and go after it. And if that involves higher education, he will support them in this as well. This news may well come as a shock to those of his fans who thought he conformed to such a rigid pattern. The other great misunderstanding, according to Derick, is that he does not like or reject members of the LGBTQ+ community. He talked about this directly without beating around the bush. He said, "I love all people, including LGBTQ+ individuals." He even showed something of his own to better prove his argument. He said that he has a close friend from his college frat who is gay. He has maintained a relationship with him until now and is even his friend. Derick has also expressed his views in his Twitter account that he does not give out discriminations, even though he has been quite harsh in his past postings in his Twitter account that even caused him to receive a great deal of flack. He admitted, "It's true, I've been quoted in the past on these issues, and people today see me in a certain way because of those comments, but this is where I am." Another thing people assume is that Derick and I are against drinking altogether, specifically because Jim, Bob, and Michelle don't drink. Derick went on to say that it is not true. He explained that he does not think that drinking alcohol is a sin. At the same time, he also noted that it is against the law for a person under 21. Therefore, he would always tell his children that it is important that they follow the law. Then, after that, it would be up for them to decide. One thing that he believes is a sin is drunkenness, and he noted that his church is very clear on that particular topic. When I pressed him for more details about how he distinguishes some of these lines, particularly within the context of the family Jill came from, his response helped build an even more complex portrait than he had yet presented. When I asked him directly if that meant he has consumed it, he gave me a simple and truthful answer. He said yes, he has. He didn't say if Jill has or hasn't, and I didn't ask him that question. From the way he responded, and because he isn't against it, I would take a guess that Jill may not have, or at least not yet, but it wouldn't surprise me if down the road she decides to give it a try. The important thing here is that the strict rules that people think they must live by aren't so strict anymore. One of the largest and most problematic issues that this family is currently, and for many years has been, involved with is a group that they are part of that is called IBLP, which stands for the Institute in Basic Life Principles. This organization and its teachings have been highly criticized over the years because of their views on women and their submission roles in marriage and family life. They actually produced their own curriculum that schools could use in lieu of formal education. They presented Bill Gothard in a role that conveyed spiritual authority, in which he would give instructions that equated in significance to that of Scripture. This alone caused quite a stir in some circles. Even more concerning, Gothard has been implicated in several lawsuits where multiple women have claimed that he acted improperly. This ultimately led to his departure from the IBLP several years ago. However, though Gothard himself may no longer be active within the institution, the plans and teachings that he established are very much a living entity. Some people argue that these teachings and practices fostered an environment of secrecy to keep abuse covered up within the family and from law enforcement. As a result, perpetrators receive protection, while silence is enforced among the victims. To some extent, this culture has continued to affect IBLP to date. When I questioned Derick directly about IBLP, he answered me more cautiously. He said, "I don't think I even have a publicly held opinion about that organization. I don't know much about it, but what I do know, I would tell you that you should stay far, far away from them. Just stay far, far away from them. Be very, very leery about what they're..." He said that as soon as you use an extra-biblical idea, meaning rules and beliefs that are not in Scripture, but are presented as if they are truth from God, it is plainly and seriously destructive, and that Bill Gothard emphasized numerous ideas as if they were in Scripture that in actuality were not. For illustration, Derick showed how, though the Bible mentions modesty, it does not mention that skirts are to be worn by women as part of their modesty, nor does it even mention that the wearing of pants is wrong. As he says, this is an excellent example of making personal standards into divine mandates. And for him, that's where the real danger lies. Derick went on further with his explanations. "There is nothing immodest about women wearing pants," he said. To support his argument, he used this very relevant example. "My own mom wears pants as well as business suits. My mom is modest in her dress. Modesty of dress has nothing to do with the clothes." But he made it clear that modesty is only one of many such principles. Although he thinks there are clear problems with some of the principles taught through IBLP, he did not have an everything must go mentality. "You can't throw out the baby with the bathwater," he said. For him, the Bible, not Bill Gothard, but the Bible, is authoritative. God's word has been around for a lot longer than any human organization, like the Christian recovery movement, he said. God doesn't need defense. The part of the message that people find tricky, however, is recognizing that two things can coexist. Times and trends change, but God does not. These concepts don't have to war within the mind of the Christian, and it's definitely possible to remain in touch with what God wants while still keeping up with the times, from the clothes on your back to the cut of your hair to cultural expressions of all sorts, for example, music. The deciding factor, of course, is where the line between cultural and morality falls. That is, you can evolve with the times and still retain your faith. Another point made by Derick is the general problem with IBLP itself: too many rules. If an organization functioned this way with this many inflexible rules, it could not possibly be healthy, he observed. This in itself is potentially destructive. It is because of this that Derick has openly stated that he does not support the teachings of IBLP. They as a family do not observe the teachings, nor are they affiliated with the said organization. Thus, now we know the truth. IJ, Derick, and the rest are no longer associated with nor supportive of IBLP. Great, thank you. That is some good insight, or as people like to call it, a little tea. Anyway, now with a brief change of gears, Derick also talked about schooling. Recently, Jill and Derick announced that they decided to send their child Israel to a public school.
He was very blunt about this as well. He said that they have been very open about homeschooling as well as going to a public school, and they didn't make this decision because of some special reason. They just thought that this is the right time. No hidden agenda, no big controversy, only a thoughtful parental decision. And finally, there was one more thing that he discussed that really interested me, his ideas about parenting and how his wife and he are choosing to raise their kids. However, Derick also had his own points to clarify regarding the supposed rules in Duggar courtships. He was clarifying that he and Jill could have displayed greater public displays of affection, such as holding hands, hugging, and even touching, prior to their engagement, but they didn't. That is an interesting point, as for years it has been perceived that holding hands is also regulated in some way. If what Derick is stating is true, then it is also voluntary when they show restraint in such situations.
However, whether Jill actually felt the ability to make these decisions, or if these ideologies had been ingrained in her for so long as a result of her teaching that they felt like rules, is an entirely different story altogether. That, frankly, is an enormous can of worms, and it's not an area where I question Derick on in our conversation. Well, all right, now we're getting to the point that many of you have been waiting to hear about. We already knew that Jill and Derick decided to leave the show in 2017. I personally chose to avoid mentioning jazz or related statements that Derick has made in the past concerning that situation. At that point, I didn't feel that it related specifically to his concerns about his family and experiences behind the scenes. What I did mention, however, was a thing that had actually occurred a bit more recently that involved Amy. I mentioned that I had posted a video of myself that was removed after a person threatened a possible lawsuit. I asked Derick if any of that sounded familiar. Had he received any threats of that nature? His answer was significant. I wish Amy could speak to what she wants to, he says. And in this single statement, quite a bit is revealed. Amy may not be able to say what she wants to say, it means. Someone else may have control over what she wants to say. And then he goes on to explain how strange and sad this situation is. As Derick explained, Amy is controlled by others, but then he made it even more disturbing by adding, "We didn't even get to be the first ones to..." And this is where we are going to stop because of the next thing he has to say. "We weren't even allowed to be the first ones to break the news of our own events," he said. Their engagement, marriage, the pregnancies, and the sexes of their babies, even the births themselves, all were relayed in the media long before they had the right to share the news. It wasn't our choice, he said. Hearing that really does put things into context. To think that you're a grown person with a family of your own, a wife and children, and yet you have this huge machine chugging along behind you, the Duggar family brand. Jim Bob is at the forefront. At some point, it stops being a family and more a corporation with the world as their playing field and family members as their actors. Within this dynamic, Jim Bob gets to decide who gets announcements, in what fashion, and where these announcements occur. The end result, the kids can start to feel less like people and more like props in this never-ending play that is counting on. There is a point where this control can remove any ownership that people feel that they actually have about their life. Derick talked about what it means to be in this position. With somebody else dictating where you are going in life, what you are doing, and how you will share your most intimate moments, it is an issue of feeling powerless. Derick just stated that if he were to go back in life, he would personally make all of the announcements, from pregnancies through everything else. Derick has also talked about legal threats that were used to keep people in line. According to him, the legal threats were actually pretty credible. That is especially clear this week since Amy has been threatened with a lawsuit just for talking about her own family. "It's gotta be overwhelming for him," I told Derick when I spoke to him. "It sounds like you're up against a machine." "What kind of machine?" he asked. "The kind where the family comes first, then the show." He didn't disagree. He said, "The family relationships become conditional in that kind of situation. If you're down to be part of the family business, everything's fine. If you're part of the show, you play by the rules of the show. And those rules, more often than not, come from Jim Bob." Even if the show was not his, even if he was not supposed to be a prominent part of it, the bottom line is that it all rested with what Jim Bob wanted. Jim Bob's presence, as Derick pointed out, was ever present. And what he said next made his influence even clearer. And what he said next made... Derick also spoke a bit about what's to come regarding their family and what they are going through. He said they will continue to write on their family blog and social networking sites. For those of you who are interested, the blog is named The Dillard Family, and I will make sure to link it below. He said, "With time, as I feel more comfortable, there are things that will come to light, yes. Some things are just very sensitive, but he said to expect more to come out later. At least now, it appears as though a great deal of their attention is focused on the process they are working through, recovering and dealing with the legal battles that are still happening with Jill, specifically her suit against the city of Springdale and the individuals who have put out certain information regarding their family. Part of it is protecting the court case, and part of it is just dealing with the aftermath of living in the limelight for all those years," Derick clarified. "Jill has been in front of the camera for years, and this is just an adjustment from that life, as well as the separation from her own family. I will make sure to include the link to her blog, as well as other resources that you can use to see exactly what she's doing. Now comes the quite personal issue of estrangement. I asked Derick why he has chosen to speak out now, particularly with fans starting to notice that he and Jill weren't attending the Christmas functions and other family gatherings. He told me that this wasn't a recent choice, but the end result of years of turmoil and lines being crossed.
It's also important to note that the Duggars seem to be watching this channel. I've caught myself in the past pointing out something about Jill or Derick that has gotten an indirect nod from the Duggars' social media sites later on. Clearly, what Derick is posting here is so much more than commentary. This is someone living through the situation and walking through a very fine line. Derick has also spoken about the handling of public outings and community engagement the family has been doing recently, and the motives behind some of these. He explained how the Duggar bunch suddenly started wishing him a happy birthday. However, this seemed rather odd considering how much the man has shared about this very same family in the past few months. Also, Jill has been allowed to go visit Ginger during an event, which has never been made possible before. Of course, fans were quick to pick out the motives in these attempts. Adding to all this tension, the Department of Homeland Security has announced that they are now investigating Josh Duggar, and Derick has specifically stated that his family does not feel that they are welcome in Jim Bob's house without his express invitation. The stakes are real, to say the least. Derick continued that most of what he has been saying is based on misconceptions that his family has fostered. He said that once a person is fed rumors long enough, they end up believing them. For instance, people assume that he and Jill have no interest in getting along with Jill's family. Of course, like every other family, they don't always see eye to eye. There are people they don't necessarily feel comfortable enough around. There are times when there is tension, but they work on doing the right thing and not having it affect them in the long run. Generally, Derick stated, they don't react to rumors or nonsense stories. Nonetheless, when rumors start to accumulate the same weight as truth, they think it is important enough for them to weigh in on. A lot of that has revolved around information that has been relayed from Derick concerning his wife's experiences on the show. He has clearly stated that his wife was uncomfortable taping after the fact that she was a victim to Josh. This affected them in pulling out of the show. Derick also related that Jill had been feeling pressured to continue taping because she did not feel like she had any other option, either due to a threat from her father or TLC. Because of that, it made it even more stressful because of an already tough situation, he said. I asked him how Jill is doing now. Well, these last few years have been like a roller coaster. Plenty of good times mixed with plenty of bad times, he answered. To help cope with it all, they have been seeing a licensed counselor, which has made a world of difference, he assured me. Derick pointed out that their faith is not only part of their healing experience. He said, God has answered our prayers, and he has used this as a way of helping us work through our pain, our stress, and bringing us closer together as a couple. They were also inspired by positive words from other people. He brought up that one resource that has been a big help for them is a book called Boundaries by Dr. Henry Cloud. In addition to going to therapy regularly, he and Jill have been able to work through a good portion of what they were experiencing.
It seems that Jill is very much taking steps to work through all that she has endured, and Derick is very much on board with that, in my opinion. I don't know if she could get counseling when all this first came to light, but I would guess that being her name thrown around all over 2015 was very much a shock to her system. When looking back at the way things happened, it is very confusing to try to point fingers of blame. Some might try to put the blame on the authorities, but it seems to me that the parents carry a great responsibility. To appear on national television with such an enormous secret, knowing what happened to the girls and not doing enough to protect them, and instead taking care of the boy, was very wrong. Many individuals have let those children down along the way. This raised my curiosity about his involvement with advocacy, so I said to him, I have noticed you have really become very active in advocating for different things. What drives you to do that? Derick also touched on his advocacy, especially on Twitter, where he regularly responds to issues such as children being taken advantage of on TV and the failure of some parents to take care of their children. He explained that he has developed a penchant for child advocacy in recent years due to a variety of reasons. He indicated that he may choose to elaborate on this topic at a different time. Interestingly, his timeline of events is very much in sync with what happened when In Touch Weekly published these documents about a 5-year period ago, which may be a very significant event in his life. As if all that was not enough, Derick has also started law school. He is more than halfway done with it, currently finishing year 2. While he never came straight out and said it, it is probably a factor that he chose law because of the situation with family, possibly because he could help shield others who may not have been adequately protected. Finally, I asked Derick about what his and Jill's child-rearing philosophies are going to be, because their philosophy is so much at odds with that of both sets of their parents. We're very careful to make sure that we're not bitter about the way that we were raised, he said. Indeed, he spoke with a great deal of wisdom and identified a credo that rang very true to me. He stated that family identity can also be divided into 3 aspects: reject, adopt, and recycle.
Well, you could choose to reject some aspects of your childhood, adopt some ideas, and then learn from your experiences by recycling them. He underlined the fact that your parents are human and they may go wrong, and it's perfectly fine if you don't choose to follow everything they say. In summary, Derick and Jill are taking what they believe is good in the teachings that worked for them and stripping away what did not, and applying their discernment to provide their own children a well-rounded upbringing. And so, as Jill and I raise our own children, it's not like we're taking everything in from our backgrounds and accepting it with open arms, Derick continues.
It's like, what are we going to accept? What are we going to reject? What are we going to recycle from our backgrounds, right? In other words, they are starting with a clean slate, contrary to D. For example, they are rejecting homeschooling by putting their son Israel inside a public school. They are rejecting the strict guidelines of modesty, which would deny girls the right to wear what they like or express themselves in the way they like. That means things like wearing pants, having piercings, and sporting short hair. They reject the IBLP and the strict teachings that come with it. They do not view moderation in drinking alcohol as morally wrong. This is further exemplified by the following. These are major changes which will make for a completely different environment for their children. They currently have 2 children, although Derick did not confirm whether or not they will have more, and how they conduct their lives as a family unit has definitely become more adaptable. Israel, the eldest, will turn 3 this summer, while the youngest, Sam, is nearing the age of 2. Derick has also been forthcoming about the couple using birth control. This goes beyond the family-size tradition of the Duggars. Also, the couple has been quite open with the children in their sex life, which has been an unusual practice in the family they raise their children in. It's important to note how unusual this is for Jill. She has been in the public limelight since the age of 1. To be in the public eye one's whole life makes it difficult to preserve a sense of privacy and autonomy. Therefore, in a sense, this journey the couple is embarking on is a reassertion of control over their own life. Derick looked back at the reasons why he and Jill decided not to be a part of the show. He said that growing up before the cameras means no matter what, your life will be aired as a result of the choices of your parents. At a point, people feel that it's not for them and that they need to have back their voice. For example, for Derick and Jill, leaving reality television is about taking control of their lives. The couple does not want their lives to depend on another person or be involved in a production that does not reward or compensate them well. Again, they also want the freedom to make decisions regarding their own family without having to seek authorization from Jim, Bob, or Michelle. This could be deciding when to announce a marriage or who is authorized to give information regarding their children. They were fighting to regain their privacy and their freedom to choose what to share and what to hold back with their kids. Now, they can share on social media as they wish and hide anything they want from being seen. Another thing Derick mentioned was the danger associated with social media platforms. Although it is an effective means of sharing things, it does not paint the entire picture. Customers only post what they want to see, and this should not be the only means of knowing people or situations. Nevertheless, he promised that in time he would continue to share more information and speak out on behalf of children. He has expressed his hopes that eventually, everything that has happened would come to light. Finally, for those that are wishing to get updates firsthand from the individual involved in this case, there are family blogs in which he and his wife are involved that are mentioned within the description below. Both Derick and Jill also run another family blogging site, or at least I think so, all of which are easily accessible on various forms of media, including and especially Instagram, where Jill actively posts videos, pictures, and quotes of inspiration. Derick has his Twitter account, and so does Jill. I will provide all the direct links to stay updated on what's new for you. I also wanted to take a moment to thank Derick for his candor and honesty. Derick could have chosen to remain silent, but instead he chose to share his perspective, and it meant a great deal to me. And I thank him for the trust he placed in me to share such stories. If any of these surprise you, or if you have questions or observations, you can certainly share. One thing you can bet as I bring this conclusion today is this. You can bet counting on won't last forever. It has become increasingly apparent within the past months what these children, these adult children, are seeking, and that is autonomy. And autonomy means walking away from the show. When the family show is also a family business, sometimes it can mean that by leaving the show, an individual has to leave the family-related situation established through the show. This is the reality of the situation. All right, everyone, that is it for now. I will return later on for further follow-ups. Bye for now.